Hello everybody, welcome back to another Gregorius Meta Prerequisites video. In the last video we learned the power rule. The power rule is the simplest one for all of derivatives. It's just bring the power down to the front, subtract 1. Okay? However, now we're going to look at the product rule, and things don't get as nice when you look at products. Okay? So, say for example, I'm just going to lay out the rule, okay? So d dx of f of x times g of x is equal to. Now, we leave the first function, differentiate the second function, then add the derivative of the second function, the first function, and multiply it with the derivative of this function here. Now, I feel that it would be appropriate to introduce some derivatives that you ought to know. Okay? For example, I can't just go on doing products of powers and stuff like that. So, okay, here goes. First of all, the derivative of c is equal to 0. By c, I mean any number. Why? Well, intuitively, if we have a graph, c is going to look like that. It's not changing at all. The derivative will be 0. Okay? The derivative of e to the power of x, okay, is equal to e to the power of x. Okay, you might ask, what is e? Well, imagine that you have a bank, okay? And this bank is offering you 100% interest. So, per year. Okay, so now you have a pound, right? You wait for a year, they give you the interest, right? That means £1 plus 100% of that is £2. Now, you say, how about you split the 100% every 6 months? So you give me 50% the first 6 months, and then you give me 50% of that. Well, the first year you'll have £1.50, the first 6 months. Then, after 6 months again, you'll give you 50% of that, more, £2.25. That's an increase. Now you do this forever and forever and forever, until you take the limit, as x goes to infinity, of 1 plus 1 over x, and then all of this to the power of x. Okay? And this equals e. Okay? So it's what that number approaches. So 2, 2.25, 2.37, something, something, 2 point something, something, and it's about 2.71828. Okay, that's approximately what it is. I'm sure if you plug in a calculator 1 plus 1 over 100, and then that all to the power of 100, you'll get 2.718 something, 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 okay? This limit converges quite fast. So that's what e is, and it's all about growth, okay? So it's very, very special number. This graph e to the x is very, very special because it's its own derivative. Now, I will make a video on the introduction to the trig functions, but if you're watching this, you'll probably know what sine and cosine are. So the derivative of sine of x is equal to cosine of x. The derivative of cosine of x is equal to negative sine of x. Okay? And when we do the quotient rule, I'll do the derivative of tangent of x, because that's going to be a quotient of sine and cosine. Okay? But for now, I'm just going to use... this one you should know I'm not going to use. But these three are going to be the main ones to use, because I don't really want to use powers every single time, you know? So, now let's look at the quotient rule in action. So what's the derivative of x squared? And we're not allowed to use the power rule. Well, this equals the derivative of x times x And this equals, now f of x, we keep the first function, x times the derivative of x. Well, the derivative of x is the derivative of x to the power of 1. We can use the quotient rule on this. The derivative, bring that to the front, we get 1x to the 0, which equals 1. Okay? Crod. Okay? So we get 1. So x times 1 is just x, plus f prime of x is just 1 times g of x is x, equals 2x. That's the correct answer. Okay? Notice that if we differentiated and then took the product, we'd get 1 times 1 is 1. Okay? Now let's take a look at the derivative of e to the x cosine of x. Now this equals, well, keep the first function, e to the x. The derivative of the second is negative sine of x, plus f prime of x. Now remember, the derivative is just e to the x, cosine of x, and now we can factor out an e to the x, and we'll get negative sine, in fact, cosine minus sine. Okay? Great. Now, let's do the derivative of... I don't know, let's do the derivative of cosine of x, sine of x. Now, this equals, keep the first function, f of x, so cosine of x, times the derivative of the second. Well, what's the derivative of that? Sine, cosine. So cosine times cosine becomes cosine squared of x. Now, add f prime of x. Well, that's the derivative of this, is negative sine of x times sine of x. So we get negative sine squared x. In the end, we're left with cosine squared of x minus sine squared of x. Okay, so we're left with this. And, well, yeah, that's your introduction to the product rule. See you in the next video. Goodbye.